Your FPL Game Week 6 complete guide with a week where there are over 500,000 different chips being played, from wildcards to bench boost to triple captains on Erling Haaland. We're going to take you through hopefully everything you need, whether you're playing a chip this week or whether you are not. We're going to talk about a fitness update to Erling Haaland as it looks like he's going to be available for this weekend. Talk about some players to buy. We'll talk about what my wildcard draft would look like, and we're actually going to discuss about 30 other players that you want me to talk about for wildcards that are not being spoken about enough. What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here. Now, just a bit of a disclaimer before we dive in. There has been music being played outside my flat practically all day and lots of people talking. And I can hear it quite loudly myself, but I'm hoping that the mic is good enough that it doesn't pick it up and you can't hear it. And this is a completely irrelevant point. But just a disclaimer, if you can hear it, apologies. There's not much I can do about it. We're going to dive straight in and talk about probably the biggest talking point of the week was when that yellow flag was added to Erling Haaland. I've been pretty clear all week that I did think he would be available for Burnley at home. I didn't think it was anything massive to worry about. He just had a bit of back pain and it sounded like a little bit of an excuse in order to not have to risk Erling Haaland against Huddersfield in the cup game midweek. And that is exactly what we've got. Pep Guardiola in his press conference today on Friday has said that Erling Haaland is ready to go. Sounds like he is back available and should be starting Burnley at home. That then moves me on to the next question, which I'm being asked is, should you triple captain Erling Haaland? If you are not playing another chip this week, you're not on the free hit, you're not on wildcard, you're not on bench boost, then yes, I would look to play the triple captain on Haaland. Now, I do think that if your team needs one of the other chips, that is more important than playing the triple captain this week. So if you're looking to play a free hit or a wild card, but don't want to do them because you want to triple captain, there are other options later on in the season between about game week 13 and game week 18, both for Mo Salah before he goes to the African Cup of Nations, but also for Erling Haaland. I think he has Sunderland at home, West Ham at home, Leeds at home, and maybe one other in that run. So the fixtures still look good later on. I do think this is a great opportunity. Burnley are sat bottom of the league for expected goals conceded so far this season. So I think it's a great chance if you want to play it. And I probably would if I wasn't on wildcard. If you're playing another chip or aren't quite certain of it, there are still other opportunities though. Then to answer a few more of your key questions this week, when to play the bench boost seems to be asked a lot, whether it's by people on wildcard this week or actually people who are not. In terms of chip strategy and general windows, we've just mentioned triple captain. You can either play it this week or from game week 13 onwards, when I plan on playing mine. There are lots of opportunities for both Haaland and Mo Salah, and there are a few others if the likes of Cole Palmer, Bukayo Saka, Alexander Isak start to look like options. There are other places you can play it. In terms of bench boost, if you want to get rid of it in the near future, it is very team dependent because it will depend a little bit on which of the cheap options you've got. Because, for example, if you've got a Crystal Palace defender, they do have a fixture, for example, this week against Liverpool. They play Arsenal in a few weeks, but if you've also got a Fulham defender, they play Arsenal in a couple of game weeks' time. Everton go away to Manchester City. And also Leeds have some good fixtures like Burnley versus Leeds in game week 8. Looks quite nice, but that's the week that Everton goes away to Manchester City. So it is very team dependent. Game week 6, 7, 8. Well, 6, a lot of people are playing another chip, but 7, 8, 9, and 11 all look quite good. And it will just depend on some of those fringe players that you've got. If you've got a Leeds defender, if you've got a Wolves defender, how much Crystal Palace have you got in there? Is Dubravka your backup goalkeeper? So there isn't a one answer fits all. If you are looking to get rid of it over the next few weeks, just have a look with something like Plan FPL, where you can look at your team for future weeks, which is linked in the description. Have a look how your team looks in some of those different game weeks, but there are quite a few options in the near future which should work well enough. And the next one is, if you've already used 3 transfers or taken a -4, should you just do a wildcard in order to completely wipe that out? So as a bit of a reminder of how the rules work, if you've taken a hit or you've used 3 transfers and you activate your wildcard before the deadline, so also if you somehow managed to take a -32 like I did and didn't activate your wildcard, I have now clicked the button, my wildcard is now active, and I will get the transfers back and I won't take a -32. I think if you're at the stage where you've taken a -4 or you've used 3 transfers and your team is great and you think you're completely in line with where the wildcard is, not only this week, but in game week 7 and probably game week 8, then I think it's fine in order to not do it. But if you've got some players who you're still uncertain of and going into game week 7 or game week 8, you're still steps behind and you still have other changes to make, then yes, I probably would play the wildcard to fix everything and save those transfers that you might have used. And the final one is, should you sell Salah in order to buy Haaland? Haaland is the most bought player, and I think Salah is the second most sold player going into game week 6. And if this is your route to go and get Haaland, then yes, I would do it. I still like the idea for some people, if it works, going with Salah and Haaland, especially if you plan on delaying the wildcard or you've already played it. But just for the next couple of weeks, Haaland with Burnley at home, Brentford away, and Everton at home after the international break just looks too good to go without. So yes, I would sell Salah if that's your route to Haaland. Then moving on to captaincy, and very obviously Erling Haaland is number one. He is ranked so high up for so many of the metrics. Predicted to score the most points, the highest chance of a goal. Manchester City are predicted to score the most goals this week, and captaincy polls show he is going to be captained by about 90-95% of the people who replied to my poll. But what is quite interesting is 36, so about 1 in 3 people are planning on playing the triple captain on Erling Haaland. And as I said at the beginning, if you have the chip and you're not doing something else this week, I really would strongly consider playing it. And I know there's talk Burnley will play a low block. They frustrated Liverpool, but the Liverpool game was at home for Burnley, which I do think makes a little bit of a difference. And Liverpool still put up 2.5 XG in that game. So it's not like they didn't create chances. And Manchester City just feel like they are creating for just Haaland at the moment. Whereas with the Liverpool fixture, there's lots of chances going to lots of different people where it feels like a lot of it is focused on Haaland. So I would look to play the triple captain this week if you have it. Mo Salah is another option. João Pedro might be on penalties without Cole Palmer there, although Enzo Fernandez took the last one. Bruno Fernandes and Semenyo are all good options, but they don't get anywhere near the predicted points that Erling Haaland has got this week, and it's no wonder he's so far ahead in terms of the polls. Moving on to the benching ranking, I have very slightly tweaked some of the graphics in this video. I hope you like them. In goal, Donnarumma is the best at home to Burnley. Vicario, I also really like. We've got Pickford, Sells, Petrovic, Darlow still likely to be starting for Leeds. Alisson, Raya, Sanchez. Sanchez will talk about some injuries that might impact that Chelsea defence this week. Rose, Pope, Kelleher, Henderson, Verbruggen, and of course Dubravka going away to Manchester City are my top 15. Terms of midfielders, forwards, if you've got João Pedro, I would start him along with the likes of Brian and Burmo. Anderson is up there, Mateus Cunha and Ollie Watkins. The video last night of Watkins taking the penalty, he just looks so low on confidence, but I still would be playing him. Then it is Chris Wood. There is a slight doubt that he might lose his place, although I don't expect it to happen this week. I think it's more stunning for the future. But if you own Chris Wood, game week 6 is probably the last fixture. You want him at home to Sunderland, and then you'll probably look to sell in game week 7 to someone like a Gyökeres, or if you want to go down, someone like a Strand Larsen. Outside of that, I do like Reinders and Dewsbury Hall, and I actually would start both of those over going for Gyökeres. I love Gyökeres as a long-term pick, but I think Newcastle at home is quite a difficult fixture for him, whereas Reinders has Burnley at home and Dewsbury Hall on some set pieces going at home to a West Ham team who are not good from defending set pieces. So then it is Gyökeres. Then it is Cody Gakpo, and Gakpo is quite an interesting one because he feels very nailed to start, and he might get some minutes up front with Ekitike being suspended. Now, I do expect Alexander Isak to start that game, but I don't think he'll be playing 90, which could see either Wirtz go into a false 9 position or Gakpo go up front, which we know he's done before. Then it is Caicedo. Then it is Eze. Eze should start. His minutes have not been that secure, though, and Martin Odegaard looks like he might be back for Arsenal, which means that Eze is competing with both Martinelli and Trossard for one of those spots on the left wing. I would play them both over Rodgers, who looks completely out of sorts, though. Then is Mateta, just based off a difficult fixture, and Strand Larsen. Then we start to see some of the defenders. I would play a Forest defender over Wirtz. I do think Wirtz should probably start, and it's all right when he does, but I think there is a lot of other attackers I'd rather play over him. Then it is Stack. I don't mind him as a cheap option, and we'll talk about some of the cheap options later, but I wouldn't play him unless you really need to. Then it is the Arsenal defence. Then you've got the Fulham defender in Anderson. You've got the Leeds defence. You've got Munoz. You've got Richards in there. So the Crystal Palace options. They're at home to Liverpool, so you might get some DEFCON in there. Then you've got the likes of the Sunderland defence. You've got Josh King. You've got Konza. Diouf. Again, it's not a great fixture for West Ham this week. Dorgu, Agbadu and Estev. Of course, there's no Spurs defenders on this list, but if you've got a Spurs defender, just with Vicario being very high up this list, I would definitely play them at home to Wolves. whether it's a Porro, whether it's a Romero, whether it's a Van de Ven, they don't feel like they should be part of a benching ranking with the fixture they've got, just like someone like a Gavardio is also not on this list, because if you've got him, you should be starting him. Moving on to a few press conference updates. So starting off at Chelsea, Cole Palmer and Tosin have been ruled out until the international break, along with Fofana. That means that the Chelsea centre-back duo for the next 3 games in terms of Brighton, Champions League, and then the Liverpool game is likely to be Chalobah and maybe Josh Acheampong. We might also see Hato get a couple of minutes in that central position. It does not look great from a Chelsea defence point of view. Cole Palmer is also ruled out. He's ruled out until at least after the international break, which is game week 8. He might be out even longer than that. So if you own him, I probably would look to be selling him at the moment. It definitely does hinder Chelsea with the amount of players that we have out at the moment. Then is Sarr at Crystal Palace. He is back available alongside Adam Wharton, who returned last week. He has had a full week of training, having returned on Monday, which we spoke about last week. So he should be available and in line to start. And he actually scored against Liverpool at the end of last season. At Nottingham Forest, Murillo sounds like he is out. Ange didn't really give anything. He just said he's not progressing the way that we wanted to. We have to be patient with him. So it sounds like Murillo is not going to be available. Looking at Milenkovic at Nottingham Forest, he wasn't mentioned in the press conference and came off after 94 minutes midweek in the Europa League with what was apparently only cramp. So the fact that there was no mention at the moment, from all I can see, this is why actually this video was slightly later, because I was trying to find a Milenkovic update and there was nothing at all, which does bode well. Probably it was just cramp and he will be available. Looking at Manchester City, Haaland is back. We've already mentioned that, but Aït-Nouri, Kovacic, Marmoush, and Khrushchev are all unavailable. And finally, looking at Liverpool, Ekitike is of course suspended. So we do expect Alexander Isak to probably start, although I don't think he'll be playing 90. I still wouldn't go there as I don't think it's safe long-term yet. Now, just before we dive into the rest of the video, this video is being sponsored by Club. Club is a free-to-play fantasy game where every couple of hours you get given a pack. If you like the player in the pack, you can add them to your lineup. But just like FPL, you do have a budget, so you can't just own all the best players. Now, actually, my team was looking quite good, although I have Tosin in my defense, who is injured this week that we just spoke about. Now, I have someone like a Lacroix or a Richards on my bench or an Anderson that I could play over them, but I am actually looking for a defender. So let's go and have a look who I'm going to get this time. Core, rare, please. I could do with a good defender, a forward. Not quite what I was looking for. Man United. Brentford away. Ooh, Sesko. I don't think I'm going to take him. I don't think he gets in there over my forwards of João Pedro and Semenyo at the moment. We do have a league which has almost 2,000 of you in. If you want to join, get involved. It is so much fun. As I say, every couple of hours, I look at what player I'm going to get. I build my lineup. We'll get the league code up for you. It's in the bottom right-hand corner, but it's also up there for you now. Make sure you're joining, get in before the week, and you start to get matched against players who have played the game for a similar amount of times. You're not going to get paired against people with just a great team, which mine was, but doesn't look that great this week. So with all that in mind, let's have a look at some of the best players to buy, both short-term or long-term. Now, with all of this at the moment, because there's different opportunities for wildcard, if you already played the wildcard, are you wildcarding this week? Are you wildcarding in game week 8? Are you saving it to game week 13? Or you just don't know? You do need to add a little bit of a lens of that, because it's not a one-size-fits-all approach at the moment because of all of that. If you're going to wildcard in game week 8, you only need players with the next couple of fixtures looking good. So suddenly Spurs look really appealing. But if you're looking long-term, then maybe Arsenal are more important. If you're looking short-term, Manchester City look great. Long-term, maybe you're looking more at including some Liverpool in your team. In goal, I still like David Raya the most. I also like Donnarumma. Then you've got Nick Pope and Petrovic. Now, Sanchez is available, but with the next two being Brighton and Liverpool without some of their key defenders, I do have him lower down the list than all of the others. Dubravka, of course, remains in the list as the starting 4 million option. Into defence, Senesi, he's continued to rise in price at 4.8 now, and I still think he is worth buying. He matches the 5 million options. He matches the 5.5 million options. So although you feel like you've missed out on some value, wouldn't let me put you off buying him. In terms of buying this week, I think Tarkowski is a better buy, but maybe Gabriel is slightly better long-term. So between those, it might depend a little bit on when you're wildcarding, similar with the likes of Virgil van Dijk and Gavardio. Gavardio's next 3 games look really good. He is playing a little bit at centre-back, so you're relying a lot of his attacking threat coming from set pieces. He is down to 5.8 million though, so cheaper than the likes of Van Dijk and Gabriel is definitely worth considering, although I do prefer the more expensive ones. Slightly cheaper, I've spoken about Newcastle, top for XGC so far this season, so you've got Dan Burn in there. I would go with him over Livramento, who is also a nice option, but with the introduction to DEFCON this year, Dan Burn has had 3 clean sheets, and in the 2 games he hasn't, he has hit DEFCON, so it looks like a nice, reliable option. And in terms of other 4.5s, I've gone with Richards, but I've also gone with Anderson. None of them get close to Senesi in the way that he's playing at the moment, but I still like Fulham, and some of their fixtures in the next couple of weeks are not great, but if you're going long term, he's the one to look at. In terms of midfielders, Semenyo is in and Bruno Fernandes. I just like what they offer long term, both giving penalties. Now, Kluivert might come back in at some point and take them off Semenyo, but with the way Semenyo's playing, he's nailed for minutes. They're not in Europe, which is also a nice boost, and a boost you get to Bruno. Brentford and Sunderland in the next 2, then it's Liverpool, and then again from game week sort of 9 onwards, the fixtures remain pretty good for them, and he continues to get returns, even Man United not looking too great, so I still like him. Understand if you don't want to go there, and if you wanted to punt something like a Phil Foden to be more exciting, I understand it, but it's not for me. Reinders, a lot of questions about Foden, as I've said, a Doku, but Reinders is just cheaper than them all and playing so many minutes, so he's definitely a great buy. Bukayo Saka, I like. It might not fit your squad structure though, so if you need a cheaper one, Illiman and Dye, I prefer just over Jack Grealish, and then we've got Kudos. If you're looking for cheaper ones, wait for the bit after my wildcard where we'll talk through lots of different players and we go through some of the cheaper ones like Stack, Xhaka, Anderson, Caicedo, Anthony, just to name a few probably. Then we're moving up front. Of course, Erling Haaland is in number 1, and he probably is number 1, 2, and 3. But outside of him, if you're not going there, I like João Pedro, I like Gyökeres, I like Evan Nilsson. Evan Nilsson, again, just with the way Bournemouth are playing, not having Europe is always a nice boost. Mateta, Richarlison, and Strand Larsen. Now, let's talk a little bit on Richarlison, because I'm being asked quite a lot about him. He feels like a fine pick if you're willing to deal with it in a few weeks, because we have seen Dominic Solanke pictured back in parts of Spurs training. I don't expect he'll feature before the international break, but game week 8 after the international break is almost a month away, and I think we might see him back around then. And when they have cup fixtures, when they have Europe and the Premier League, I do think there will come a point where Richarlison becomes a bit of a risk. But while Solanke is out short term, his minutes continue to prove me wrong, and when he's on the pitch, he's pretty good for returns. In terms of a few players who are not on here, which you might be considering selling, you've got Ollie Watkins and you've got Morgan Rogers being the 2 big ones. Watkins just looks so out of sorts, and we do have a pretty good record for them, particularly defensively and not conceding loads of goals. So I probably would look to be moving off your Villa players if you have spare transfers this week. So now looking at my wildcard, and surprise, surprise, my wildcard still hasn't changed. I think this might be the first week where, from the first time I made transfers for the wildcard and made a wildcard draft on the Saturday and Sunday, that it hasn't changed all the way up until the Friday. Now, I did actually make a transfer, I think, on Wednesday. I sold Richards to Alderette of Sunderland and then brought Richards back in because I like Richards a lot. And it's a toss-up for me between having the money in the bank, which could help me further down the line, but also then having the depth that I want. And I keep planning my team, and I don't need Richards for about the next 5 or 10 game weeks. He only gets in my lineup once, in which case you're probably thinking, well, Harry, then you don't need him. Just go for a 4 million option. And there are some quite good 4 million options. But the whole point of Richards is not to get in my starting 11. The whole point is that I want to build a defense that has depth, that doesn't need transfers. And I actually planned it with Richards in. And I think I only need a maximum of 1 defensive transfer until about game week 20. And at least until game week 16, where we get the 5 additional transfers. Whereas if I go with a Sunderland defender, who would probably be the one I'd go with, I could also go with Leeds. Would not be going with Burnley, though, because they haven't looked that great defensively, and especially in terms of their underlying data. Although it saves me a bit of money, if anything was to happen to my main 4 defenders, I would suddenly be really short. Whereas Richards is unlikely to get into my starting lineup very much, but I feel like he gives me a bit more depth, which I am definitely looking for. So that's where we're at with the team. I still haven't changed anything. I have wondered about a few changes. I've wondered about going for Dan Burn, but I don't think I'm going to drop Gabriel, and I definitely don't think I'm going to drop Tarkowski. So then I thought about going with Pope or Petrovic in goal, save a bit of money, because Raya can be very frustrating. But when you look at the clean sheet, the projected goals conceded, the projected clean sheets over the next about 15 game weeks, Arsenal are so head and shoulders above everyone else. And there is a planned transfer in about game week 12 where I think I might do Gabriel to Virgil van Dijk. And if I do that and I don't have Raya, I'll end up with no Arsenal defence in my team. So going for the double up short term with an eye to potentially buy Van Dijk in Gabriel's place is the current plan. And that's the only real defensive transfer I have planned. And I do want you all, unless I get a significant injury, to shout at me in the comments every single week if I even mention doing a defensive transfer that isn't something like Gabriel to Virgil van Dijk. If I'm moving around 4.5s, I'm moving Tarkowski to someone else with good DEFCON, I want you to tell me in the comments that I told you that I wasn't going to do it, because I'm trying to get to a point where I can roll lots of transfers. I don't think I'm going to need David Raya changed. Hopefully I'm not going to make many defensive transfers unless there is an injury, because they're all very good for DEFCON. Gabriel, the only potential one to go. And between now and game week 16, game week 20, if I only need one transfer defensively, that means I've got about 15 transfers to move around my 8 attackers. Now, there will be something I need to do. Something will change. Someone will look better than I think. Someone will look worse than I think. And there will probably be some other changes. But I want to build a defense that I just don't really need to change. And that's why I do think I'm going to go with Richards over a 4 million option, despite the fact that someone like a Mukiele, an Alderette at Sunderland, or a Goodmanson or a Rodon could definitely be an option just to save me a bit of money. And if I want to fit Haaland and Salah in, it might be worthwhile having that money in the bank. But I think I'd rather take that money out of someone like a Gabriel or a Tarkowski rather than dropping down my depth, or take it out of David Raya. Into my midfield, Fernandes, Semenyo, Reinders, Ilman and Dye feel pretty locked for me. Ilman and Dye, there's a little bit of desire to go for someone like a Kudos. Very impressed with Spurs. His goal threat's not that high, but I still like him. I just prefer Dye over Grealish, just because of the money saved now and the fact that he's on penalties and he's had some pretty decent DEFCON data in a couple of the games. Reinders is great for his price. Semenyo has been incredible, and Bruno, especially with Palmer being a doubt. I've gone with Gyökeres and double arse defense over Saka, and Salah not being in there right now and not wanting to trust Foden just yet. You could if you fancied Foden minutes, and actually Pep's been quite positive about him today, but that's where we're at. I don't think he's going to go anywhere. Up front, I'm going with Gyökeres. I know he's not looked great. I know he's in some of the big games, he's gone a bit missing. And I did actually wonder about starting my cheap midfielder over Gyökeres just this week and having Gyökeres ready for West Ham at home. And it's possible, but I don't think I will. So it really feels like the 3 spots left that I'm looking at are David Raya in goal, David Raya and Gabriel. Do I need double Arsenal? Richards and Stack. I've got 0.6 million in the bank, so Stack to Dewsbury Hall I could do, but I'm not certain that I love Dewsbury Hall if I've got double Everton already. I could go to someone like a Jadon Anthony, and we'll talk about a few other options. There's Granit Xhaka, there's Caicedo, there's Elliot Anderson. He is probably the least nailed player in my team, and I don't love it as a pick, but I still feel pretty settled on the general squad of my wildcard. It's just a couple of those fringe players that I'm looking on changing. And then I'm very aware that my wildcard and a lot of other wildcards are looking very similar. What I would say, first of all, on that is about 5% of the player base in FPL this year, so under 500,000 managers, are playing the wildcard this week. So still playing the chip is differential enough. And actually, in my draft, 7 players at time of recording are under 20% owned, and 5 players are under 10% owned. Which, although all the wildcard drafts do look the same this week, and I completely agree with you and I completely get it, and if it's frustrating to you, I also understand that. But there are a lot of things which cause the picks to be the same. We're going to talk through some players who are a little bit different, and if you want to consider them, that's absolutely fine, and feel free to make your team different if you would like to. But it is worth noting that maybe some of the content that you're seeing is still a relatively small pool of people in the overall grand schemes of the game. And while we're sat at 2 million or 3 million, 4 million, if you're inside the top 100k, you're still playing against a very big pool of players who are not playing the chip this week. And a lot of the players that we're buying are still quite low owned in terms of their overall ownership. So although your wildcard might look similar to the people playing the same chip as you, the people not playing the same chip as you, which is still 90% of the active player base, are doing something different. But if you wanted to do something not quite the same, let's have a look. So in goal, I've gone with David Raya, but I do like Donnarumma, particularly short term. And then from game week 13 onwards, the City fixtures do look quite good. So you could free up an Arsenal spot in case you want to leave it open for a Timber, for a Saka, for a Declan Rice, and go with Donnarumma. Could also go with Nick Pope. I don't think we're ever going to want triple Newcastle. And the long-term fixtures don't look bad. And people say, Harry, the short-term fixtures are not great. If you're buying a goalkeeper on wildcard, you're probably not going to want to change them that much for quite a long time. So the immediate fixtures don't matter too much. What you really need to focus on is how good the defense is. And Newcastle have looked great. Sanchez, I do think he'll keep his place for Chelsea. And although he might miss the odd couple of games, when you've got a Dubravka as a 4 million option, you can still go with him. Vicario I like as a short-term pick, but then the fixtures do get a little bit more difficult, so I probably prefer the other ones you got here. And if you need a 4.5 million option, I would go with Petrovic at Bournemouth. I do, of course, prefer Senesi, and you might not want to double up on them. Then into defence, I think the number one defender I've been asked the most about is Chalobah, and actually, with Tosin, who's next on the list, looking like he's out and you can't pick him, Chalobah is probably the most nailed, and I don't think he's blanked so far this season, but I still think that after the international break, when Tosin is available, when you've got Fofana back and we've got maybe a slightly easier game after the international break before Champions League, I don't think Chalobah is fully nailed as a Chelsea fan, and he hasn't been perfect so far this season. So I would still be a little bit cautious despite how the results have been. Kukurea, I think he's fine. I just don't think he gets close to some of the others like a Van Dijk, a Gabriel, Tarkowski, even some of the cheaper ones like a Senesi, given what you've got. Also a Gavardio, I would prefer over Kukurea. If you want a bit of the Manchester City defense, you could go Donnarumma, but I do like Gavardio. Now at Arsenal, there's lots of talk about Saliba mainly, and also, of course, Gabriel, who's in my team. There's not much talk about the fullbacks. That is still because in my mind, there is too much risk there when they play 3 times a week. Ben White is in and out of fitness, but he can rotate with Timber. At left back, Calafiori is first choice, but they do have Lewis Skelly, who can play there. And they've, of course, got quite a lot of squad depth in terms of their centre-backs, who can also play at left back. So I do think there is too much to put me off, because when you have an easy fixture, like West Ham at home in game week 7, which comes straight after a European fixture midweek, that is when we're most likely to see the rotation, and you probably want the most nailed players. I don't have a Spurs defender. They are very good short term. I don't know how much you want them long term. And it's one of those, because their DEFCON isn't great, I prefer an Anderson over a Van de Ven, just because if you've got a difficult fixture, you can play Van de Ven all the time. You can play Anderson all the time, but you might not want to play Van de Ven. Burn, I've spoken about, I quite like. If you have a squad structure, you can fit him in. And then it's Sunderland, Leeds and Burnley. I would not go for Burnley. Their defensive data is the worst. Sunderland, Alderette is the safest. Mukiele, if he stays at centre-back, will be by far the best 4 million option looking at his DEFCON. But he can play right-back, and it is possible that he goes there. So maybe Alderette is slightly safer. Then you've got Leeds, Goodmanson and Rodon. There was not much to pick between them. Which you go with will depend a little bit on when you want to bench boost. If you want to bench boost in game week 8, they're all quite good. Sunderland have Wolves at home and Leeds play Burnley. But outside of that, it will depend on maybe which week you want to play them. If I had to pick one, I still think I would go with Leeds, because I think their short, medium and actually long-term fixtures look the best. And Sunderland do get hit quite badly over the next few weeks. Once they have a couple of good fixtures out the way, it starts to turn pretty nasty. Into the midfield. So we've covered quite a lot of these. Saka, if you can fit him in and you want to go with him over Gyökeres, he looks good. He is likely to have lost pens to Gyökeres, but we don't know that for certain. But if you can get up to him instead of Gyökeres, I don't mind it. Brian Mbeumo of Manchester United at a cheaper option to going with Bruno. He has looked really good. He's actually the biggest underperformer of XG so far this season. Enzo Fernandez, I actually quite like, and his minutes are very reliable. He might be on penalties while Palmer is out of the team. Eze, I can't trust his minutes. Grealish, I like. I just prefer going with Illiman and Dye. Sarr, similar. I really like him. I think I prefer and Dye given the fixtures they've got, but Sarr back. I bought him early on, and I like him as an option. Anthony Gordon, that forward line for Newcastle is too much of a minefield. I would not go there. We don't even have Voltamada in the forwards list, just because I think it's too much of a minefield. Foden looks like he's getting back into the team, and actually I don't mind it, but I wouldn't pick him over Reinders. If I'm going with Foden, it's because I'm going Haaland, Foden, Reinders. I'm not picking Foden over Reinders. Gakpo feels pretty nailed. If you want to keep a bit of Liverpool and not going Salah, you can go there. Xavi Simons and Kudos. Simmons' minutes just are too much of a put off, so I would go Kudos, and I like them short term. Minte, under 6 million. Some of the Brighton fixtures look good. He just is a little bit injury prone, but I don't mind it if you're looking for a bit of a differential. Gravenberch, I'm not sure it's worth the Liverpool spot when we probably will want them further down the line, but he's not bad for DEFCON. He's not the best and, gets a goal. Caicedo I really like. If you can go with him as a sort of fifth attacker on your bench every week, I have absolutely no problem with that. Anderson similarly, and then just to basically pick apart the cheaper options. I wouldn't go with King because I think he might lose his place eventually. In terms of the cheaper ones, Caicedo, great for DEFCON, doesn't do that much else despite the goals he's scored. Anderson, great for DEFCON, and actually in some of these more difficult games will probably be better and has some attacking threat. He's probably my favourite if you have 5.5 over Gravenberch, over Caicedo. In terms of the cheaper ones, Dewsbury Hall, if you're not going for Ndiaye or Grealish, Stack is reliable on some set pieces. Xhaka has a better DEFCON than Stack. I still don't trust Burnley to go with Anthony despite how well he started the season. So in terms of the 4 million options, Stack is number 1, Xhaka 2, and Dewsbury Hall 3, just because you've probably got another Everton player. And finally, moving up front, we've spoken about Richarlison. I just still think at some point he'll be an issue. Gyökeres, he's in my draft. I like him. Richarlison, good short term. Gyökeres, safe for long term. Evanilson, reliable. He just seems to dodge points sometimes, but he will get enough goals over the course of the season. Bowen, I just don't think West Ham are good enough. If they sack Graham Potter, then we can look there again. But until then, I don't like it. Mateta is a talisman. He'll score enough goals this season. Absolutely no issue with that. He's probably my favourite outside of the ones that you've got on Wildcard for sort of long-term picks alongside Evan Nielsen. Strand Larson, a nice cheap pick. Also like their long-term fixtures. Isak, I wouldn't buy despite the fact that I think he'll play this week. Thiago, Calvert-Lewin, Foster. If I had to pick a cheaper one, I'd go Calvert-Lewin. He might be on penalties for Leeds as well. And that is all. I'm going to wrap up because it's saying that I've been recording for 38 minutes. I've cut because I had to go and answer the door, but it's going to be a long video. So I'm going to end it right there. There will be a deadline stream on Saturday morning, usual time, 2 hours before the deadline. I will have scheduled it up above in the top right-hand corner or on my page if you want to go and click notify for that reminder when it does go live. Thank you all for watching. If there's something still not answered in this video, please drop it in the comment section down below. Any feedback on all my videos, I am always open to hear what you think. Doing my best to improve my content as often as I can. That is it. We're going to wrap it up. 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll be back again very soon.